Uh, yeah, let's go ahead and start this lecture by Chris Hedges. See what he's thinking about the state of the world. This is Iran and Gaza are only the beginning. Chris Hedges at Princeton.
Thank you for inviting me. I have.
Nope. Every time, man. We gotta be at 1.0 speed.
Thank you for inviting me. I have just finished with the cartoonist Joe Sacco. I hope you know his work, Palestine, Footnotes in Gaza, a book on the genocide. We interviewed 29 families in Egypt from Gaza and have spent the last year writing the story of the genocide through their experiences. We literally turned in the manuscript a week ago, which is why, if I look burned out, I am burned out. It'll be published.
Yeah. When I say he's a journalist, I mean he's like a real journalist. Like he goes and collects information from war areas and stuff, and then, consolidates it, like edits it all down to a nice package for people to consume and whatnot. He's like an old school kind of journalist, not like a, like not like a Twitter journalist or a TikTok journalist or something. Like he's like a real
In
journalist.
October. But I didn't want to speak about the book, given what's happening as I speak in southern Lebanon, in Iran, and in Gaza. I wanted to speak a little more globally today. The genocide in Gaza is the beginning. Welcome to the New World Order, the age of technologically advanced barbarism. There are no rules for the strong, only for the weak. Oppose the strong, refuse to bow to its capricious demands, and you are showered with missiles and bombs.
Yep.
We watch this madness daily with the war on Iran, the saturation bombing of southern Lebanon, and the suffering in Gaza. International bodies, such as the United Nations, have been neutered, transformed into useless appendages of another age.
Yeah.
The sanctity of individual rights, open borders, and international law have vanished.
Yeah, all of these things are things that I've talked about before, but I do love how eloquently put this whole, like obviously he's reading from something like a written statement. I don't know if this is his quote or somebody else's quote, but all of these things are 100% accurate.
Psychopathic rulers of human history, those who reduced cities to ashes, herded captive populations to execution sites, and littered lands they occupied with mass graves and corpses, have returned with a vengeance, opening up a vast moral abyss. The law, despite a few valiant efforts by a handful of judges who will soon be purged, domestically.
Like Kareem Khan, we saw recently his, those perfectly timed sexual assault allegations against him as soon as he started going after Benjamin Netanyahu and Gallant from Israel for war crimes. Some random person came out and accused him of sexual assault, but that was proven completely false at this point. But now, of course, immediately after that, a new person came out, I think. And so, all of these are just oh man, what is going on here? The Empire using every tool that it possibly can to stop any sort of actual what's the word? Repercussions for the atrocities that they're committing right now.
And in international bodies such as the International Court of Justice is contemptuously violated. Savagery abroad, savagery at home. The BBC's Lucy Williamson reports that Israel...
Sorry, real quick. That is one thing that people need to also be aware of, because I know a lot of Americans don't ever even think about, like, they'll often ask, like, why should I care about this, right? Why should I care? Like, it doesn't impact me at all, except for maybe a slightly higher gas price if we're being completely barbarous monsters and committing genocide in a land way over there or whatever. Um, so to all of the people who are very selfish and don't really see this from a moral perspective or whatever, um, you have to understand that the atrocities we commit abroad always come home. We're seeing some semblance of that with ICE right now today, in terms of like ICE getting all of their military gear from the Middle East, all of their tactics they've learned on how to control a populace, a civilian populace, are all coming from what they learned in their barbarous adventures abroad. All of this stuff eventually comes home. So the more brutal we are abroad, the more brutal we will become against our own people. So that is why you should care, even if you are a little selfish American.
Is destroying South Lebanon, and I quote, using Gaza as a model, a blueprint for destruction, used again as a path to peace, end quote. Over 1 million people have already been displaced in Lebanon. 1/5 of the entire population of a country that already hosts the world's highest number of refugees per capita in just a few weeks. Add to this 2 million displaced in Gaza and 3 million displaced in Iran. 6 million people rendered homeless. For 4 decades, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been lobbying for the US to go to war with Iran. Previous administrations, Republican and Democrat, have refused, in no small part because of fierce opposition within the Pentagon, which did not view Iran as an existential threat and did not project a positive outcome for the United States or its allies.
Wow.
But Donald Trump, encouraged by his inept negotiating team of his son-in-law Jared Kushner and fellow real estate developer and golfing partner Steve Witkoff, each fervent Zionists, took the bait.
Yeah, they did take the bait in a sense. It's all a combination of things. They are all obviously more Zionist than most probably than most administrations, but most previous administrations were pretty Zionist as well. Um, but I think it's a combination of the stupidity of the people in power, but also the imperial decline of the West in general and America, leads to, this feeling that it's now or never with a lot of these things. So I think we're kind of seeing that as well. That's more like broad and meta than just the individual actions of individuals. That's just a vague feeling that all, like everybody, including the Pentagon and everybody in places of power, just kind of feels at this point that America's time on the world stage is over, like as the hegemon. And so if we're going to, you know, try and make Israel the hegemon of the Middle East or whatever, now's the only time we can do it. So, uh, yeah.
Joseph Kent, who resigned his position as director of the National Counterterrorism Center to protest the war, wrote in his resignation letter that, quote, Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. The public rationale for the war on Iran since it began on February 28th has been protean. Is it to shut down Iran's nuclear program? Is it to thwart Iran's ballistic missile program? Is it because the U.S. carried out preemptive attacks on Iran, as Marco Rubio said, to ensure the safety of U.S. assets once Israel decided to strike? Is it because
Yeah, it's everything and nothing, right? Like I really do encourage everybody to like read George Orwell, because he describes this like aspect of going to war for like for no reason, or being in a continual unending state of war for absolutely no reason. Like he describes it way better than I ever could. But um the reasons are always both like existential but mundane. They're like, and it's always like there's multiple reasons that all don't make sense with each other, and they're all the opposite of each other, but it doesn't really matter because the populace is just like primed to just be in a constant state of war. Like, uh, yeah, I don't know. I see lots and lots of parallels with like more and more parallels with 1984 every single day.
Because the Iranian government carried out lethal repression, killing hundreds of anti-government protesters during massive street protests? Is it regime change? Is it an attempt to shut down Iran's so-called state-sponsored terrorism? Or are these subterfuges for something else? Certainly Israel and the US seek regime change, but here it appears the US and Israel diverge. Israel also apparently seeks, as in Iraq, Syria, Libya, and Lebanon, the physical disintegration of Iran, the breaking apart of the country into warring ethnic and religious enclaves, the transformation of Iran into a failed state. Persians in Iran, where I worked frequently, constitute roughly 61% of the population, with various minority groups who often suffer state repression, making up the remaining 39%. These ethnic groups include Azerbaijanis, Kurds, Lurs, Balaks, Arabs, and Turkmens, along with religious minorities such as Sunnis, Christians, Baha'i, Zoroastrians, and Jews. The shattering of Iran into antagonistic ethnic and religious enclaves would leave Israel as the dominant power in the region, giving it the ability to, if not occupy its neighbors, then directly control and subjugate them through proxies, part of a long-held desire for greater Israel. It would also make it possible for foreign states to control Iranian gas reserves, the second largest in the world, and its oil reserves, 12% of the global total. Israel's crusade against the Palestinians, the Lebanese, and now the Iranians is justified by the extermination of 6 million Jews.
So a lot of this is all very doom and gloom, and sometimes Chris Hedges really does get really doom and gloom with his like sort of analysis of the world. I would just always remind people that like Israel does not have the capacity to do all of these things that it wants to do. It is a country of like 9 million people, and it's stretched like as thin as you could possibly imagine. It is also the weakest it has ever been currently, both militarily and politically. So like Hamas is stronger than it's ever been. Hezbollah is stronger than it's ever been. It feels like, at least right now, with how much damage they're doing to Israel. So like, you know, and also every one of these actions that they do is not some like set in stone thing that will like lead to the outcomes that they desire or whatever. Yes, it will be horrible, obviously, for the people who are suffering. Woo! Sorry. For the people who live in these countries, but there will always be resistance because that is just the human condition. No matter what they do, there will be resistance. I don't think that they have the capacity, especially without America, because really they already would not have the capacity to maintain just their existing borders as Israel. Like they wouldn't be able to maintain their apartheid system that they have with like the Palestinians. If America did not prop them up with endless amounts of money and political support. So, like, if America stops supporting them, they can't even support their own current borders. They sure as hell couldn't support any sort of expanding borders. They would also need an incredible amount of immigration to the state of Israel, when all indications are that, like, the outgoing immigration of Israel is, like, 30 to 40,000, like, at least since October 7th, like have left Israel. Like, so their population would likely decline, or if it didn't decline, it would be replaced by even more stupid fascists. Like, so, you know, all of these, like, this is very doom and gloom. I just want to give people like there is like always there, you should always have hope, because no matter what happens, there is always a silver lining that can be, that can happen.
During the Holocaust. But it is not lost on the global South, especially Palestinians, that nearly all Holocaust scholars have refused to condemn the genocide in Gaza. Not one of the institutions dedicated to researching and commemorating the Holocaust have drawn the obvious historical parallels or decried the mass slaughter. Holocaust scholars, with a handful of exceptions, have exposed their true purpose, which is not to examine the dark side of human nature and the frightening propensity we all have to commit evil, but to sanctify Jews as eternal victims and absolve the ethno-nationalist state of Israel of its crimes of settler colonialism, apartheid, and genocide.
That's the whole reason that they chose right after the Holocaust to create the state of Israel, because they knew that they could weaponize that for the foreseeable future. And they were right. They were able to weaponize it for 100 years. For 100 years, nobody was able to say, this is an apartheid, like in polite society or whatever. That's finally changing now, at least when it comes to people, like the average person, in America, I mean, in particular. But the institutions are still captured and will probably continue to be captured because they are fundamentally bought and paid for by the same capital interests that are benefiting from the nation state like project of Israel.
The hijacking of the Holocaust, the failure to defend Palestinian victims because they are Palestinian, has imploded the moral authority of Holocaust scholars and Holocaust memorials. They have been exposed as vehicles not to prevent genocide, but to perpetuate it, not to explore the past, but manipulate the present. Any tepid recognition that the Holocaust may not be the exclusive property of Israel and its Zionist supporters is swiftly shut down. The Holocaust Museum in Los Angeles deleted an Instagram post that read, "Never again" can't only mean never again for Jews, after a backlash. In the hands of Zionists, never again means precisely that, never again, only for Jews. Ami Cesar, in Discourse on Colonialism, which if you haven't read it, you should read it, writes that Hitler seemed exceptionally cruel, only because he presided over, quote, the humiliation of the white man,
Yeah.
applying to Europe the
100%.
colonialist procedures which until then
100%. They would not have given a shit about Hitler if he only targeted black and brown people. Like they would have, like he would have been, wiped away as like, yeah, okay, it was bad, but it wasn't that bad or whatever. But he targeted, white Europeans. And that's a no-go for white supremacy. Like you're not supposed to target. We're only supposed to subject brown people to that sort of industrialized violence. And so, yeah, that is a very astute observation that people should take into heart.
had been reserved exclusively for the Arabs of Algeria, the quote-unquote coolies of India, and the blacks of Africa. The near annihilation of Tasmania's Aboriginal population, the German slaughter of the Herero and Namakwa, the Armenian genocide, the Bengal famine of 1943, then British Prime Minister Winston Churchill referred to Hindus as, quote, a beastly people with a beastly religion, along with the dropping of nuclear bombs on civilian targets in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, illustrates something fundamental about Western civilization. Genocide is not an anomaly. It is coded within our DNA.
It is. It was in the founding of our country, and we have never reckoned with that. And until we do reckon with that, and the through line from the genocide of the native to the slavery and apartheid system that we created for blacks and all that, we will never be able to, fulfill a good future for the American populace. So.
In America, the poet Langston Hughes said, "Negroes do not have to be told what fascism is in action. We know." Its theories of Nordic supremacy and economic suppression have long been realities to us. The Nazis, when they formulated the Nuremberg laws, modeled them on laws designed to disenfranchise blacks.
I've talked
America's
about that a lot.
refusal to grant citizenship to Native Americans and Filipinos, although they lived in the US and US territories, was emulated by the German fascists who stripped citizenship from Jews. American anti-miscegenation laws, which criminalized interracial marriage, were the impetus to outlaw marriages between German Jews and Aryans. American jurisprudence classified anyone with 1% of black ancestry, the so-called one-drop rule, as black. The Nazis, ironically, showing more flexibility, classified anyone with 3 or more Jewish grandparents as Jewish. The millions
That's
of
one of like that is one of the funny parts about racism is how you have to just pick some arbitrary line to determine, and it's kind of the reason why it always ends up failing because it becomes more exclusionary the more racist like people become or whatever. But yeah, they always have to pick a line at some point where it's like, okay, well, I guess 1/4 Jewish isn't really Jewish, so we'll say you're white, like, but yeah, that number always goes down the more entrenched the white supremacy becomes in society.
of indigenous victims
Oops.
of colonial projects in countries such as Mexico, China, India, Australia, the Congo, and Vietnam, for this reason, are deaf to the fatuous claims by Zionists that their victimhood is unique. They too suffered holocausts, but these holocausts remain minimized or unacknowledged by their Western perpetrators. Israel embodies the ethno-nationalist state our own Christian fascists and the far-right dream of creating for themselves, one that rejects political and cultural pluralism as well as legal, diplomatic, and ethical norms. Israel is admired by the far right because it has turned its back on humanitarian law and uses indiscriminate lethal force to cleanse its society of those condemned as human contaminants. It was this distortion of the Holocaust that troubled Primo Levi, who was imprisoned in Auschwitz from 1944 to 1945 and who wrote Survival in Auschwitz. Levi was a fierce critic of the apartheid state of Israel and its treatment of Palestinians. He saw the Shoah as, quote, an inexhaustible source of evil that is perpetuated as hatred in the survivors and springs up in 1,000 ways against the very will of all, as a thirst for revenge, as moral breakdown, as negation, as weariness, as resignation. Levy deplored the Manichaeism of those who shun nuance and complexity. He condemned those who reduce the river of human events to conflicts and conflicts to duels, us and them. He warned that the network of human relationships inside the concentration camps was not simple. It could not be reduced to 2 blocks, victims and perpetrators. The enemy, he knew, was outside, but also inside. Mordecai Chaim Rumkowski, known as King Chaim, ruled in the Lodz ghetto in Poland on behalf of the Nazi occupiers. The ghetto became a slave labor camp that enriched Rumkowski and his Nazi masters.
Yeah, understand that like slavery and like free labor is always, a part of the fascist like the camps that are created, right? It's never like they're not just throwing them in camps to like keep them away from people or whatever, or or even just be brutal to them in these like little in these like places that are like separate from the rest of society. They're also they are always using them for free labor in order to generate profits for the capitalists. Fascism is the end state of capitalism. It is the final stage of capitalism. It is the most capitalism. It's like I would say it's the purest embodiment of capitalism. because it requires incredible amounts of violence and incredible amounts of repression and incredible uh, it just requires and basically slavery in order to keep the profits going up, because eventually you will always reach a point where profits don't just keep going up naturally in society. As you know, if there's no new productive capabilities or technologies or whatever, like profits don't keep going up forever, and eventually you have to begin eviscerating, subjugating and enslaving your own people if you want to keep those profits going up. And so, um, and that's why you should always remember, like uh, when they're taking people and throwing them in detention camps, they're going to start making them work for free as slaves, if they haven't already. I think some of them already do that. Same with prisons. They're going to take as many people that they can, throw them in prison, and make them work for free or whatever as slaves, because that is just kind of the end state of a capitalist society.
Rumkowski deported opponents to death camps. He raped and molested girls and women. He demanded unquestioned obedience. He embodied the evil of his oppressors. For Levy, he was an example of what many of us, under similar circumstances, are capable of becoming. We are all mirrored in Rumkowski. His ambiguity is ours. It is our second nature, we hybrids, molded from clay and spirit, Levy wrote in The Drowned and the Saved. His fever is ours, the fever of our Western civilization that descends into hell with trumpets and drums, and its miserable adornments are the distorting image of our symbols of social prestige. Like Rumkowski, we too are so dazzled by power and prestige as to forget our essential fragility, Levy continues. Willingly or not, we come to terms with power, forgetting that we are all in the ghetto, that the ghetto is walled in, that outside the ghetto reign the lords of death, and that close by the train is waiting. Levy understood that the line between the victim and the victimizer is razor thin. We can all become willing executioners. There is nothing intrinsically moral about being Jewish or a survivor of the Holocaust. And Levy, for this reason, was persona non grata in Israel. Zionists find in the Holocaust and the Jewish state a sense of purpose and meaning, as well as a cloying moral superiority. After the 1967 war, when Israel seized Gaza, the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, Syria's Golan Heights, and Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, Israel, as American sociologist Nathan Glazer approvingly observed, became, quote, the religion of the American Jews.
Yeah, I will almost guarantee you that Israel took all of its directions from us in America. I guarantee you the people in power told Israel exactly how they would formulate their society, exactly how they would organize their society, exactly how they would expand their territory, exactly how they would send their civilians to go create settlements to then claim that territory and create skirmishes that then bring the government. Like, it's all the same strategies that we used against the indigenous people of our country. So I guarantee you all of the things that Israel has done, all of the atrocities that Israel has done, has been directly communicated by America to them to do. Um, and also exactly how they developed as a brutal barbaric people is a direct consequence of our you know how we designed them as a colonial outpost in the Middle East.
Holocaust became their moral capital. Jewish suffering is depicted as ineffable, uncommunicable, and yet always to be proclaimed, writes the European historian Charles Mayer in The Unmasterable Past, History, Holocaust, and German National Identity. It is intensely private, not to be diluted, but simultaneously public, so that genteel society will confirm the crimes. A very peculiar suffering must be enshrined in public sites, Holocaust museums, memory gardens, deportation sites.
Yeah, uh, a very peculiar suffering, i.e., like white people, white people getting the same treatment that we've given to black people, as we kind of like discussed earlier. Um,
Sites dedicated not as Jewish but civic memorials. But what is the role of a museum in a country such as the United States, far from the site of the Holocaust? Is it to rally the people who suffer or to instruct non-Jews? Is it supposed to serve as a reminder that it can happen here? Or is it a statement that some special consideration is deserved? Under what circumstances can a private sorrow serve simultaneously as a public grief? And if genocide is certified as a public sorrow, then must we not accept the credentials of other particular sorrows too?
um, Sorry, I'm gonna to go back to that. Uh, yeah, so the distinct focus on, the Holocaust, right? Um, is 100% a mission to get the American public on board with the state of Israel. That is like 90% of the goal. Like, sure, I'm sure like, it is good for people to be educated on the atrocities of the Holocaust or whatever, but how much it permeates every aspect of American life, compared to all of the other genocides that have taken place throughout history or whatever, um, is like significant. Like, so and I guess, like, to some extent we do have some of those other ones, right? Like, we do have history and museums and stuff dedicated to, for instance, the enslavement of African Americans, um, or to uh, the Native Americans, although we very rarely actually refer to what we did as genocide, and we really couch all of our language around all that. But those are all directly related to us, right? Like, as America. The Holocaust kind of was, in that we were at war, uh, about, like, around it, but yeah, I guess the thing that I would say is that there have been plenty of other genocides that have taken place by white people against a colonized black populace or brown populace or whatever, that we don't have, dozens of museums about all over the country. And so that exceptionalism is intended for a purpose, and it is for in my opinion, it's for the getting people as much on board as possible and propagandized as possible to be for the nation state of Israel, the project of Zionism.
Not accept the credentials of other particular sorrows too. An American historian of Polish ancestry argues that with the German invasion of 1939, the Poles became the first people in Europe to experience the Holocaust, and that historians have so far chosen to interpret the tragedy in exclusivist terms, namely, as the most tragic period in the history of the Jewish diaspora. If Polish Americans claim that their own quote unquote forgotten Holocaust, what recognition should they enjoy? Do Armenians and Cambodians also have a right to publicly funded Holocaust museums? And do we need memorials to Seventh-day Adventists and homosexuals for their persecution at the hands of the Third Reich?
That's true.
Unique suffering.
That's true. Many many other people did suffer during that time period, and we do not, like, have nearly as many memorials or teaching or learning about them. And like I said, I think the reason is because it doesn't the suffering of homosexuals or trans people or uh, black people during the Holocaust, it uh, does not in any way advance the nation state like the colonial project of Israel, and therefore it is not seen as important, or as necessary for people to understand. Now, it has been somewhat included in the modern understanding of the Holocaust, by, like, as liberals have, like, tried to use it to then justify, or, like, try and prevent, try and protect other, like, minorities and stuff, like, in a good way, in my opinion. Like, it's a good thing that they've done that, uh, and brought that stuff to the forefront. But it wasn't in the original sort of teachings and learnings of the Holocaust, in the American psyche for the past 60 years or whatever, until recently at least.
Suffering confers unique entitlement. Any crime Israel carries out in the name of its survival, its right to exist, is justified in the name of this uniqueness. There are no limits. The world is black and white, a never-ending battle against Nazism, which is protean, depending on who Israel targets. To challenge this bloodlust is to be an anti-Semite, facilitating another genocide of Jews.
Not anymore, baby. I think we're finally moving past that, and that is a good thing. Every single anti-Semitism post on Twitter, or like "you're an anti-Semite," whatever, is now met with skepticism. Now, that is also bad, obviously, for actual anti-Semitism, because that will also grow significantly on the right. It was what we were saying from the very beginning would happen if people keep conflating the nation-state of Israel with the Jewish people and the crimes that the nation-state of Israel does, as they so lovingly say, on behalf of the Jews. How we always said that you should separate those two things because it will lead to anti-Semitism, like real anti-Semitism growing, and that is clearly happening. But on the bright side, people crying anti-Semitism whenever someone, just has brown skin or is Muslim or whatever, like, oh, being Muslim is anti-Semitic, that shit doesn't really work anymore. So that's at least the bright side of, the nation state of Israel's biggest export, which is anti-Semitism.
This simplistic formula not only serves the interests of Israel, but also the interests of colonial powers that carried out their own genocides, ones they also seek to obscure. The sacralization of the Nazi Holocaust offers a bizarre quid pro quo, arming and funding the State of Israel, blocking UN resolutions and sanctions that would condemn its crimes, and demonizing Palestinians and their supporters becomes proof of atonement and support for Jews. Israel, in return, absolves the West for its indifference to the plight of Jews during the Holocaust, and Germany for perpetrating it. Germany uses this unholy alliance to separate Nazism from the rest of German history, including the genocide German colonists carried out against the Nama and Herero in German Southwest Africa, now Namibia. Such magic, the Israeli historian and genocide scholar Ross Siegel writes, legitimizes racism against Palestinians at the very moment that Israel perpetrates genocide against them. The idea of Holocaust uniqueness thus reproduces, rather than challenges, the exclusionary nationalism and settler colonialism that led to the Holocaust. Professor Siegel, the director of the program in Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Stockton University in New Jersey, wrote an article about the war on Gaza on October 13th, 2023, titled A Textbook Case of Genocide.
I read that one. I read that one. Yeah, it was. It was the one of the most memorable articles, I feel like, that I read during that time. And I was reading a lot of articles during that time. Basically, a lot of days I would just wake up and read articles, and then throughout all of work I was just like reading articles 24/7. And it was, I think, a kind of trauma response to the atrocities that were going on in some sense. But that one does stick out in my brain as one of the first ones that I wrote that I was like I don't know, just very important, I feel like.
Denunciation from an Israeli Holocaust scholar whose family members perished in the Holocaust was a very lonely stance. Professor Siegel saw in the Israeli government's immediate demand that Palestinians evacuate the north of Gaza, and the blood-curdling demonization of the Palestinians by Israeli officials. The defense minister said Israel was fighting, quote-unquote, human animals, the stench of genocide. The whole idea about prevention and never again is that, as we teach our students, there are red flags, that once we notice them, we're supposed to work in order to stop the process that could escalate to genocide, Professor Siegel told me, even if it's not genocidal yet.
Yeah, and that's what everybody who was out there on day one was trying to do. We all knew, everybody who had been aware of Israel as a fascist project before October 7th knew exactly what was coming, and we were all out there trying our best to prevent the atrocities that were about to come, and we were demonized every step of the way. Um, and I'm not asking for any sort of like thank or like reparations or acknowledgement or whatever. But I am asking for people to learn from this, especially if you were, uh, not super on board for all of those Palestinian protests or whatever at the beginning. When you see these leftists, like I'm serious, you should be able to recognize it when it is a true left cause or whatever. I hope people start to understand the dynamics of leftism and anti-imperialism as well. But at the very least, when you see a bunch of people go out there and protest, and you see especially state repression against it, and the state and cops and brutality and violence against it, to think back to this time period and how you may have thought differently at the time that happened to how you do now, and give people more credit and more, you know, like don't disparage them and give them like help and material support as well, and hopefully go out there and protest yourself, because we can't keep doing this. We can't just keep doing, um, when we know what's going to happen. We know the brutality that is about to come, and we go out there and try to stop it, and we go through this whole rigmarole of of the exact same thing of the state and media trying to push it down or whatever, and tamp it out, and people just going along with it. We got to stop that, and it's the only way that we will be able to build a better future for each other is if people become more educated on these sorts of things and are able to apply historical understandings to the modern day, which is what I'm trying to do here today with with this educational stream.
Holocaust studies as a field might be dead, which is not necessarily a bad thing, he continued, if indeed Holocaust studies is intertwined from the beginning with the ideology of global Holocaust memory. Maybe it's good that we won't have Holocaust studies anymore, and maybe it will open the door for even more interesting and important research on the Holocaust as history, as real history. Professor Siegel paid for his honesty. The offer to lead the University of Minnesota's Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies, which has issued no condemnation of the genocide, was revoked. When Professor Siegel and I testified at the state capitol in Trenton in opposition to the adoption of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, the IHRA bill, which equates criticism of the state of Israel with anti-Semitism, we were jeered by Zionists, and our microphones were cut by the committee chairman. There we were, arguing that this bill would curtail free speech while we were, in real time.
Also, so sorry, I'm going to go back to this again. People also need to understand what real repression looks like. And these are acts of real repression. When the state is like sends the cops in, or when the institutions of power start cutting microphones and start excluding voices, this is what real, like, actual repression looks like, and actual freedom of speech violations look like. It's not when, like, it's not when, like, I don't know, you lost your job because you said a slur or something. Like that is not like repression. That is not the state coming for you. That is individual. Like, you as an individual made that choice, and you as an individual made people uncomfortable. The state largely is fine with people going out there and saying slurs. In fact, the current iteration of the American state would probably like more people to be out there saying slurs. So that's not real repression. People need to be able to understand what real repression looks like, and it's things like what he's talking about right here. Yeah, it's when the institutions of power use their power to keep people from essentially like saying certain things or whatever, like especially when it comes to things like human rights and all that sort of stuff.
Being denied free speech. Genocide is the next stage in what the anthropologist Arjun Apadure calls, quote, a vast worldwide Malthusian correction that is geared to preparing the world for the winners of globalization, minus the inconvenient noise of the losers. The funding and arming of Israel by the United States and European allies, as it carries out genocide, has effectively imploded the post-World War II international legal order. It no longer has credibility. The West can no longer lecture anyone about democracy, human rights, or the supposed virtues of Western civilization.
And you'll notice they have completely stopped that now. They don't pretend like they're going to war with Iran to install democracy, or if they do pay it lip service, it's, very like, yeah, okay, some rebels can rise up and free these people or whatever, but they don't really try that hard anymore because they just know it's like, it doesn't, like, people see America for what it is at this point.
The ruse that somehow we as a nation promote democracy, equality, and human rights is finished. At the same time that Gaza induces vertigo, a feeling of chaos and emptiness, it becomes for countless powerless people the essential condition of political and ethical consciousness in the 21st century, just as the First World War was for a generation in the West, Pankaj Mishra writes. None of us who reported from Israel and Palestine, where I worked as a reporter for 7 years, predicted this genocide. And yet, we were acutely aware of the genocidal impulse that lay at the heart of the Zionist project, the desire by large segments of Israeli society to eradicate and expel all Palestinians. This genocidal impulse was there from the inception of Zionism. Victor Klemperer, a professor of linguistics and the son of a Berlin rabbi living under Nazi rule, noted in his diary, quote, to me, the Zionists who want to go back to the Jewish state of 70 AD, the destruction of Jerusalem by Titus, are just as offensive as the Nazis, with their nosing after blood, their ancient cultural roots, their partly canting, partly obtuse winding back of the world. They are altogether a match for the National Socialists. I covered the extremist rabbi Meir Kahane, who claimed that violence was a Jewish virtue and revenge a divine commandment. He was, when I was based in Jerusalem, barred by the Israeli government from running for office.
Yeah, his ideology back then was considered repulsive to even to Israelis, which have been in a fascist project for, already at that time, like 30, 40 years or whatever. But back then they were like this sort of ideology from Kahan or whatever was considered repulsive. Nowadays, this is the average Israeli's perspective. Like it is like they are devolving at an incredible clip to becoming, a just primitive, barbaric people.
Kahane was assassinated on November 5th, 1990 in New York City. His Koch party in Israel was outlawed 4 years later after Baruch Goldstein, a Brooklyn-born doctor and Koch member, entered Hebron's Ibrahimi Mosque and opened fire on worshipers, killing 29 Palestinians, an event I covered for the New York Times.
Yeah,
Goldstein.
that person would be cheered right now. They'd get the Medal of Honor if they did that in today's Israel. Like there's literally they go out and celebrate the people who like raped that Palestinian in prison. Like they are, like I said, they are devolving at a rapid rate.
Dressed in his army captain's uniform, was overpowered by worshipers and beaten to death. Koch, following its statements of support for the massacre, was declared a terrorist organization by the United States. But Kahaneism didn't die. It was nurtured by Jewish extremists and colonists. Koch's racial intolerance and calls for mass violence against Palestinians infected larger and larger segments of Israeli society. I saw this intolerance at political rallies held by Netanyahu, who received lavish funding from right-wing Americans associated with AIPAC when he ran against Yitzhak Rabin, who was negotiating a peace settlement with the Palestinians. Netanyahu's supporters chanted Kahana-inspired slogans such as "Death to Arabs" and "Death to Rabin." They burned an effigy of Rabin dressed in a Nazi uniform. Netanyahu marched
How ironic is that? Yeah, man, they really are just a Nazi state
in
at this
front of
point.
a mock funeral for Rabin, and Rabin was assassinated by a Jewish fanatic on November 4th, 1995. Netanyahu, who first became prime minister in 1996, has spent his political career nurturing these Jewish extremists, including Itamar Ben-Gvir, who hung a portrait of Goldstein on the wall of his living room, Bezalel Smotrich, Avigdor Lieberman, Gideon Sarar, Naftali Bennett, and others. Netanyahu's father, Ben Zion, who worked as an assistant to the founder of revisionist Zionism, Vladimir Jabotinsky, who was referred to by Benito Mussolini, and I quote, as a good fascist, was a leader in the Herut Party that called on Israel to seize all of the land of historic Palestine. Many of those who formed the Herut Party carried out terrorist attacks during the 1948 war that established the State of Israel. Albert Einstein, Hannah Arendt, Sidney Hook, and other Jewish intellectuals described the Herut Party in a statement published in the New York Times as a party, quote, closely akin in its organization, methods, political philosophy, and social appeal to Nazi and fascist parties. There has always been a virulent strain of Jewish fascism within the Zionist project, mirroring the strain of fascism in American society. Unfortunately for us and the Palestinians,
Because it was modeled directly after us. Like it was modeled, directed, I'm sure, by our CIA to operate exactly how we did against the indigenous people here.
these fascistic strains are ascendant. The decision to obliterate Gaza has long been the dream of far-right Zionists, heirs of Kahana's movement. Jewish identity and Jewish nationalism are the Zionist versions of the Nazis' blood and soil ideology. Jewish supremacy is sanctified by God, as is the slaughter of the Palestinians who Netanyahu compared to the biblical Amalekites who were massacred by the Israelites. Europeans and Euro-Americans in the American colonies use the same biblical passage to justify their genocide against Native Americans.
Exactly, dude.
Enemies, usually Muslims, who are slated for extinction, are subhumans who embody evil. Violence and the threat of violence are the only forms of communication those outside the magical circle of Jewish nationalism understand. Messianic redemption will take place once the Palestinians are expelled. Jewish extremists call for the Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of three of the most sacred sites for Muslims, supposedly built on the ruins of the Jewish Second Temple, which was destroyed by the Roman army in 70 AD, to be demolished. These extremists call for it to be
terrible.
replaced by a third Jewish temple, a move that would set the Muslim world alight. The West Bank, which zealots refer to as Judea and Samaria, is being annexed as I speak by Israel. Israel, governed by religious.
So, okay, yeah, they are trying to annex the West Bank. But I always wonder though, like what then, right? You take over the you take over the West Bank, and then you have no, like, if you actually annex it, right? Then you have no cover for your apartheid anymore. You you now own the territory essentially of another 3 million or however many Muslims. I can't remember how many are in the West Bank. Um, that don't have any rights unless you decide to give them rights and make them full-fledged citizens. Or are you going to just put them in ghettos? Are you going to push them onto reservations? Like, if I had to guess, they would probably do something along those lines of like taking all of the Palestinians in the West Bank and like trying to, Trail of Tears them all the way like to some sort of ghetto uh, or something like that. But uh, I think that though that like when it becomes that obvious, it becomes so that like I feel like that would potentially have too much international implications, but who knows anymore, man? With how brutal America is as well, they'll probably be gung ho for a new Trail of Tears over there. They're like, we miss doing that shit. Like, yeah, probably. So I don't know. Maybe they can.
Laws imposed by ultra-Orthodox Shas and United Torah Judaism parties will soon mirror the despotic theocracy in Iran. James Baldwin presciently saw this regression to our innate barbarism. And just the students here, if you have not read James Baldwin, you don't understand America. He warned that there was a, quote, terrible probability that Western populations, struggling to hold on to what they have stolen from their captives and unable to look into their mirror, will precipitate a chaos throughout the world, which, if it does not bring life on this planet to an end, will bring about a racial war as the world has never seen, and for which generations yet unborn will curse our names forever. The savagery in Iran, Lebanon, and Gaza is the same savagery we face at home. Those carrying out the genocide, mass slaughter, and unprovoked war on Iran are the same people dismantling our democratic institutions. The Iranians, Lebanese, and Palestinians know there is no appeasing these monsters. The global elites believe nothing. They feel nothing. They cannot be trusted. They exhibit the core traits of all psychopaths: superficial charm, grandiosity and self-importance, a need for constant stimulation, a penchant for lying, deception, manipulation, and the inability to feel remorse or guilt. They disdain as weakness the virtues of empathy, honesty, compassion, and self-sacrifice.
That is why I say like we are a nation on the road to hell, dude. We are on the road to hell. Everybody, uh, anyone who is in our borders and is not actively going out there and fighting against this is on the road to hell. Like we are, we're getting there and we're getting there fast, people. That includes all of my Christian brothers and sisters out there. If you are not out there on the lines, you know, trying to stop this shit from happening, putting your body on the line like Jesus would have been doing, like, you're also on the road to hell. So I'm just letting people know. A lot of people don't understand the evilness that is our country, and also the blasphemous version of Christianity that reinforces that evilness. And I do not think, if there is a heaven or a hell or a God, that they will be looked upon very kindly for allowing that to happen to a religion of what I believe is like an important and good and righteous historical figure of Jesus Christ. So.
They live by the creed of me, me, me. The fact that millions of people share the same vices does not make these vices virtues. The fact that they share so many errors does not make the errors to be truths. And the fact that millions of people share the same forms of mental pathology does not make these people sane. Eric Fromm writes in The Sane Society. We have witnessed evil for nearly 3 years in Gaza. We watch it now in Iran. We watch it in Lebanon. We see this evil excused or masked by political leaders and the media. The New York Times, in a page out of Orwell, sent an internal memo telling reporters and editors to eschew the terms refugee camps, occupied territory, ethnic cleansing, and of course, genocide.
Yeah, and for all you like right-wingers out there, if you think that the New York Times is somehow some leftist liberal, like, I mean, it is a liberal institution or whatever, but um, liberalism is also fundamentally like on board with the genocidal nature of the Israeli project, and because they are on board with capitalism, and capitalism necessitates this sort of like regional dominance. So, like, I don't know, like we need to stop pretending like the New York Times is some sort of like lefty institution. It most assuredly is not. They will always support the military-industrial complex and the our war crimes abroad every single time.
writing about Gaza. Those who name and denounce this evil, including the heroic students who set up
Hell yeah.
encampments on
Heroes, heroes, every single one of them, man. They will be remembered as heroes one day. It's just it's always so fucking annoying to watch the heroes of our generation be tarred and feathered by our media and by the population at large. And yeah, it's very annoying to me, even though I know it's inevitable, because that's how power works. But it is just always so annoying to me.
on campuses here, Princeton, and even abroad, are smeared, blacklisted, and purged. They are arrested and deported. A deadening silence is descending upon us, the silence of all authoritarian states. We know where this ends.
Yep.
Fail to do your duty. Fail to cheerlead the war on Iran. Speak out against the crime of genocide and see your broadcasting license revoked as Trump's chair of the FCC, Brendan Carr, has proposed. We have enemies. They are not in Palestine. They are not in Lebanon. They are not in Iran. They are here among us. They dictate our lives. They are traitors to our ideals, and they are traitors to our country. They envision a world of slaves and masters, and Gaza is only the start. There are no internal mechanisms for reform. We can obstruct or surrender. These are the only choices left. Thank you.
He used the term obstruct. I would say struggle or surrender. But yes, we will all be colonized, and like I'm talking about workers everywhere, including in America. We will all be colonized by these same people. He's talking about particularly the Stephen Miller types, the Marco Rubios, that like all of these people who are at the top and have attained power. Uh, they will not like, and also like our oligarchic billionaires like Elon Musk. Basically, if you want to think about it as like the Epstein class or whatever, um, they will colonize us as well. They will force us to work for penance or for like tiny little whatever, like scraps or whatever, fight each other. They will enslave us. They will throw us in work camps. They will do all of these things to us, to you, my American viewer out there. Um, unless we stop it. There are nonviolent ways to stop it, and then there are violent ways to stop it. We try to use all the nonviolent ways as we possibly can until it becomes necessary for violence. But um, but when I say nonviolent, I mean things like unions, like labor strikes, like general strikes, things that bring capital to a halt, things that cause them to worry and get scared that they won't be able to maintain their super ultra mega profits in the future. Um, those are the nonviolent means, and then eventually, like the only way I think, unless we can stop them with nonviolence, which I don't really have a whole lot of hope for, that would require a strong opposition party and a strong labor movement that we just don't have in America. Eventually, it will come to violent resistance. Same here. We will be the Palestinians. We will be the Gazans, the workers, the everyday lower and middle class people of America. Like that, you will have to unfortunately join the fight in some way if you don't want to die a slave. Like, so these are unfortunately, the times in the world that we are born into. Like I always say, there's always silver linings to everything, and it doesn't have to go as brutal and barbaric as as Chris Hedges, who is really just a Debbie Downer all the time about this stuff. Like I do see hope. I do see hope, and that's why I think it is valiant and good to support Iran and their resistance to American, pedo aggression or whatever we're doing to them right now. So yeah, that was a good one. That was a very good lecture. I liked it a lot. Um, very saddening, I guess, but we live in a sad world, so what can you expect?